Yeah, the Avengers are the Earth's mightiest heroes and all that, but it doesn't mean they don't make some baffling decisions from time to time. Hey, to err is human, right? Well, I guess that doesn't apply when some Avengers are space aliens and others are synthezoids, but you get the point.
You people are so petty.
Today, I'm talking about some of the worst decisions the Avengers ever made. And yeah, I get it, a lot of these had to be done in order for the plot to progress, but still, these decisions could have been a bit more thought out.
Ow.
And what would have happened if they were? All of that in today's video. Let's get started right now. With Tony Stark gone, the genius billionaire playboy philanthropist left behind a gigantic void in terms of superheroes and a legacy that many will want to follow. Oh, and he also left behind one of the most powerful and destructive weapons on Earth in the form of EDITH.
Badass.
An augmented reality security and defense program that gave the user access to all of Stark's global satellites as well as all his missiles and drones. And instead of leaving that to someone like Rhodey or like Professor Hulk, he gives it to Peter Parker.
Do not open, don't open, don't open.
The teenager who almost orders a drone strike on a high school classmate and then gives them away to a supervillain after being easily manipulated. Wowza. Come on, Tony, that just was not a great decision. I get that it ties into the theme of the movie with Peter struggling to live up to Iron Man's legacy and be the next Iron Man, but wasn't there a way to do that without it seeming like a terrible decision on Tony's part? Like, couldn't you have had it where Tony gives EDITH to Peter because he knew that Beck or someone would have stolen it? Or better yet, could you have had Peter take EDITH from Tony's things or whatever because he wants to be the next Iron Man but learns the hard way that he can't be Iron Man and therefore should be Spider-Man instead? Then you have the same results, only it doesn't hinge on the fact that Tony gave a super advanced weapon system to a teenager.
Yeah, he did.
I love Captain America Civil War for its epic swerve at the end. For the third act, we're convinced that Baron Zemo wants to revive other super soldiers and create his own army of Winter Soldiers. You know, classic bad guy stuff. But then things turn much more personal when it's revealed that Zemo actually wants to destroy all the super soldiers and tear the Avengers apart. It's here that Zemo reveals to Tony that Bucky was the one behind his parents' car crash, and the result is Iron Man versus Captain America, with Bucky thrown in the mix too. But here's the thing, what really sends Tony over the edge is the fact that in that moment, he finds out that Steve Rogers, the beacon of truth and justice with an unflappable moral compass, was keeping the information from him. I think that's why the fight escalates in the way that it does, especially since Cap spends the whole movie telling Tony about doing the right thing.
Do you even remember them?
And really, if Steve had taken the time to explain the situation to Tony at any point before this, things might have gone differently. I think Tony would have been more forgiving if he had time to process and wasn't just bombarded with the video of watching his parents beaten and strangled to death. Plus, if you believe that Cap couldn't lift the hammer in Age of Ultron rather than just pretending like he couldn't, it's been suggested that Cap keeping this secret from Tony was what was keeping him back from being truly worthy of Mjolnir. And given the timeline of everything, I think it makes sense. At the end of Age of Ultron, after defeating the evil rampaging robots, the Hulk feels so ashamed by his actions that he turns off the tracking on the Quinjet and flies off to parts unknown. This led to Hulk getting sucked into a wormhole and crashing on Sakaar, where he quickly becomes the champion gladiator and even gets a room with his own jacuzzi. That's when you know you really made it in life. And maybe just by this turn of events, this is a good choice by the Hulk, but I think it's actually a really bad one because of what it does to Bruce Banner, as well as does nothing to help Hulk's guilt. The whole reason Hulk takes off is because he thinks the people of Earth absolutely hate him for what he did, but there's really not a lot of evidence to support that. Like, if the population can forgive Tony for creating Ultron, then they could forgive Hulk for breaking a few buildings, just saying. WandaVision was the first MCU Disney Plus show, and it started an entire new trend of predicting theories and trying to figure out the mysteries behind the show.
I have what I want.
As the first few episodes aired, the rabid fanbase quickly decided that Mephisto was going to be the one pulling the strings and be the figure responsible for trapping Wanda in this suburban terror along with the clearly evil Agatha Harkness. But it turns out the real twist wasn't that it was Agatha all along. Ha! good luck getting that out of your head now, but rather that Wanda herself was the one who caused it. In her grief over losing Vision in a spectacularly gruesome way, meaning she first had to eliminate him herself, then watch him be brought back to life only to hear his screams as Thanos ripped out his forehead, she unleashed her inner Scarlet Witch and turned the Westview community into her own personal bubble. And sure, you can chalk that up to grief, so it wasn't technically a bad decision since she couldn't control it properly, but she did make the conscious choice to try to keep the town under her control so that Vision and her kids would live, and that's sort of horrific. Not a great decision for a hero, you know? Oh, and speaking of those, I just want to gauge your thoughts on Wanda's ultimate decision of trapping Agatha in her own mind prison and turning her into the nosy neighbor she was pretending to be. Is that a fair punishment for Agatha, or a horrific one that a supervillain would do to a hero? Just asking. Let me just start off by saying that I completely understand why Sam was hesitant to take Cap's shield and become Captain America, but that still doesn't mean it wasn't a bad decision.
I understand.
I was one of those who was shocked that Steve Rogers gave the shield to Sam when Bucky was standing like 5 feet away, but the Falcon and the Winter Soldier convinced me not only why Sam was the right choice for the part, but also the weight that comes with a black man holding the shield and representing America. And Sam obviously had a little bit to go through in order to be ready for the shield. But due to that growing process and the decision to remain Falcon for a bit, it allowed the government to replace Steve with John Walker, who almost tarnished the legacy of Captain America forever.
Me? Never.
He started out fine. He was a loyal soldier who wanted to serve his country, but the pressure of being the best, plus his own traumatic past, led him to taking the super soldier serum and losing his marbles a bit. Now, I wonder in the MCU what people think about the John Walker era of Captain America, but remember that marketing campaign was everywhere. Are there still John Walker fans out there in the MCU world? Does everyone realize that Walker's no longer Captain America, but rather US agent and Sam is the holder of the shield? So many questions, and it all stems from Sam's decision to not take the mantle right away. When you're a hero, you're gonna lose people close to you. That's a sad part of the job, but sometimes the loss is just too great and you turn towards your darkest impulses. That's what happened to Hawkeye in Endgame. The movie opens with him losing his entire family in the snap, and that leads him to don the Ronin mantle and dispatch his own form of justice throughout the criminal underworld. And while this grief was understandable, it also probably wasn't the best decision for someone like Hawkeye, who the world had come to know as a hero. Being Ronin is not what we wanted to see for someone like Clint, and this decision has led to a lot of awkwardness now that everyone's back. Not only does he have to deal with covering his tracks in the Hawkeye TV show, but also, can you imagine the awkward conversation he must have had with his wife after she was snapped back? Yep, Tony is appearing on this list twice. I tried to spread the love when it comes to bad decisions, but come on, as much as Tony was a huge hero who saved the universe, he also maybe was the king of bad decisions? Like, this whole list could have been made up with questionable Tony Stark decisions, but the other one I'm putting on this list is my favorite. It's the time in Iron Man 3 when Tony, who's piping hot mad about Happy being hurt by the supposed Mandarin, turns to the cameras, calls out the Mandarin, tells him he's a coward, tells him to come directly to his house and attack him, then proceeds to give out that home address and saying that the terrorist was basically a dead man who didn't know it yet. And while that's maybe not the best decision by itself, it's truly baffling when Tony goes home and then proceeds to do nothing in terms of home defense. Like, Tony, come on. If you're inviting someone to attack you, don't be surprised when they come and attack you, maybe? Okay, this one happens in the What If TV show, but I still wanted to include it here. I think there were a lot of good episodes of What If, but a truly remarkable one was the What If Doctor Strange lost his heart instead of his hands episode, which saw Christine's life be taken in a different universe and the arrogant Sorcerer Supreme going to extreme lengths to bring her back. Even though everyone tells him it's a horrible idea, he still decides to experiment with dark arts and spends seemingly centuries summoning creatures to absorb their powers, all to change a fixed point in time. This results in him destroying his entire universe, so really you could argue this is the worst decision of all. It's especially bad because with all this time he spent, he probably could have figured out how to jump to different universes where Christine was alive, rather than trying to fix his own. Wouldn't that have been easier overall? Next time, someone should tell Strange to try out different solutions rather than just one, because he had to have had some inkling about the multiverse, right? Sure, then you get into the whole thing about maybe Strange didn't want some other universe Christine, but rather his own Christine, which I guess is sort of sweet in a, oh gosh, he destroyed billions of lives by being arrogant and foolhardy type of way. Remember the early days of Thor when he had things like bleached eyebrows and was thought of as the too serious one? Man, how things have changed. But what I'm about to mention is truly a decision that screams this would make a cool trailer moment rather than something that makes logical sense. In the first Avengers movie, when Thor comes to get Loki, he gets in a little scuffle with Captain America and Iron Man. And perhaps it's because Iron Man annoys him, but Thor is just not having any of this. He launches himself at Captain America with the intention of smacking him with Mjolnir. But Thor, you don't know how strong Captain America is. Yeah, he seems agile, but like, how did you know he wasn't a fleshy human like all the other fleshy humans you've met? You just tried to bring the fury of Mjolnir down on this one guy. What if, like, Coulson was there trying to talk Thor down instead? You would have turned him to goo. Thor reacted in anger, and it almost wiped out the first Avenger. Thank goodness for the shield, I guess. Black Widow often thought of herself as someone who needed a lot of redemption in her life. Her ledger was in the red, so to speak, and I think there's no better embodiment of the guilt that Natasha carried around than her decision to blow up Dreykov's daughter in order to eliminate Dreykov.
Try then.
This decision clearly haunted Natasha for her whole adult life, and she spent the rest of her days trying to make up for it. That is, of course, until she found out that the daughter was actually still alive and now living a tortured existence, which added on to the guilt she was already feeling. I'm just saying, if Black Widow had decided a different route in order to eliminate Dreykov, then her whole life would have changed. I mean, these are just the worst decisions made by the characters themselves, but what do you think was the worst creative decision in the MCU? They rarely misfire, but the first one that pops into my head is the whole Mandarin Trevor Slattery twist in Iron Man 3. Sure, they corrected it, but back then, it sparked a ton of backlash. What do you think?